There are some situations where you're more suited to lead than me. Please lead, because that's what this team needs.
I'm Doug.
I'm Una.
That was Diana Futrovsky.
And this is our podcast,
Amazing Teams. Join us as we have conversations with remarkable people who are building amazing teams. Diana Futrovsky, welcome to the Amazing Teams podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Doug and Una.
Of course. Diana is the managing director at Communications Research Associates in Meyer Leadership. She advises clients on how to engage employees, generate organizational alignment, and build leadership credibility. She has expertise in designing strategic messages, developing communication strategies, and executing large-scale change initiatives. Her recent clients include Northwell Heath, KPMG, Dell, Boomi, and Comcast Cable. Wow. Anything you'd like to add to that, Diane?
No, it's kind of nice. It's I feel like I'm getting a little pep talk, like, you can do this. You are good at these things. So I appreciate it. Thanks for the warm welcome.
Of course. All right. Where do you want to start, Una?
Diana, on a personal note, I have a prompt for you. Just to introduce yourself as Diana the person and not just Diana the managing director. What is one thing that you do that makes you lose track of time?
Oh, playing guitar. I don't do it as much as I would like to, given that I've got lots of little kids and I'm pretty busy. But when I play guitar and I look up and I'm like, oh, there goes an hour, there goes another hour. So I'm sure I'm not alone for all the musicians out there who can just kind of lose themselves in that special time.
I understand. I call it lost in sound.
Good.
Well, we'll just dive straight into the topic of amazing teams. So when you hear those words, amazing team, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. So first I think of a bunch of examples, mostly sports related, the Miracle on Ice hockey team and the movie associated with it. And then I jumped to how I would quickly define a team, any team, and especially an amazing team, is one where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But I think there's something special in amazing teams, more specifically when an amazing team comes together, it feels and acts different than just a group of people coming together to do something, right? Like the Miracle on Ice hockey team wasn't just your average hockey team. And I think an important nuance is that having a group of highly talented people doesn't necessarily mean an even greater team. It doesn't mean that because you have great talent that there's going to be an even greater sum. It doesn't work like that. And so I was thinking, like, the body is actually a pretty good analogy for this concept. Is like, I can have really strong leg muscles and I can have really great cardiovascular health and strong lungs, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be an Olympic long jumper. Those two things just don't equate to me being great at something. There's a lot going on in the way our body works, right? Like the way our mind is sending signals to our legs, the way our eyes are perceiving depth, the decisions I make to get up and work out or practice my skill versus sitting on the couch. And I think amazing teams are a lot like that, right? Like there's a lot going on at any given time, but if you look at it, it's seamless. Just like an Olympic long jumper is seamlessly jumping and they look like, wow, they were born to do this. I feel like amazing teams are the same way.
Very cool. You touched on the movie Miracle, which is a pretty popular movie here at my house because I have a son that plays hockey. Why do you think that team performed at such a high level?
Okay, so now if my husband listens to this, he's just going to school me because I'm not as well viewed on the movie as he's probably seen it a dozen times and I have not seen it that many times. But my understanding is that, they came to play and didn't have any expectation for like who I am. Not that they didn't have high standards for themselves, but they truly came to be a part of a team and not to serve their own self-interests. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really awesome when you get to see a group of people come together who are skilled, right? Like obviously they had to be skilled if they were playing hockey at even the semi-professional level, but they come together to serve the team's good. And you're able to get so much done when you let egos aside. You're able to go so much further. Again, I don't know all the ins and outs of all the players, but that's my gist of that team coming together and just saying, this isn't about me, it's about the team.
Mm-hmm. You had sent over an email with a few links, and I got curious and I clicked a few, and I ended up on a field note about player-led teams. And I really think that it's an interesting topic, and I think it's something that we could really delve into.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. I'm going to start with an example that we often use when we're working with our clients and coaching leaders specifically on how they think about their leadership. Is I'll often ask people to think about the best team that they've ever been a part of, and then to describe it in a few words. Now, this question has worked really well during the pandemic and post-pandemic world, where people will just enter words into the chat. So, I ask people to just reflect on your best team that you've ever been a part of, and what are some words that we see. We see a lot of collaborative, trusting, dependable, and listening. Everyone's accountable to his or her own actions. Everyone's working hard, pulling their own weight, that sort of stuff.
Hi, listeners. It's Doug. I want to pause here and reflect. Think about an amazing team you've been on. Why was that team amazing? And what words come to mind? Got them? Okay. Let's jump back in with Diana.
And rarely do we ever hear anyone start or mention right away leaders. Like, oh, I was on a great team and it was the best team because the leader was the best. And every now and then we'll get something like that. Like, I've had a really admirable leader. But when we push on that, or we ask people then to describe leaders of these teams, very rarely, if never, do we hear, oh, well, this leader was great because he or she really took control of every situation and told me exactly what to do. Or he or she was really dominant, domineering, and they took all the questions out of what it meant to be a part of this team. And the takeaway, then, what we've studied from the teams that we've worked with, is the best teams are those that are player led, meaning while there is a de facto leader who is, of course, responsible for a lot of elements of the team and accountable for the team's results, leadership itself comes from anywhere and everywhere within the team, given on when it's needed, right? There are some situations where you're more suited to lead than me. Please lead, because that's what this team needs. And the leader of a player-led team is really one who inspires leadership among everyone else.
Got it. That's what I was going to ask. If it's something that is coached from top down, or if it was something that you hire. Do you hire players that are leaders? So I was a little bit curious about that.
Yeah. I think you can certainly scan talent for coachability, those kinds of markers of potential of, like, this is someone who works well and adapts in many different situations. If I were trying to assemble a player-led team, those are the kinds of things that I would look for in the recruiting process. But there are certainly a lot of things that leaders can do to start to create the culture of a player-led team. In fact, I would say there are things that they need to do, because if they don't set the tone of, hey, this is a place and this is a team where at any moment in time, I'm going to call on you and I'm going to mean it. If they don't properly set that culture and that tone, people are going to default to the hierarchy. Hierarchy is really, really strong thing. And even situations I've found myself in personally, where I've given a lot of accountability, the minute some kind of hierarchy creeps in, like, oh, well, shouldn't he or she see this before I send? I'm like, wait, nope, that's not a part of this team. Like, I have to be able to step up. And so, leaders of player-led teams are always thinking about that. They're always thinking about, how am I setting this stage and getting everybody on board for what this is?
What are some differences you've seen between traditional teams, more hierarchical, and the player-led teams? Like examples of maybe different performance or achieving higher results, or just pure team morale
Yeah. What leaders of player-led teams do differently, and kind of what's in their arsenal to help create and forge a team of leaders is one, they need to know people's strengths. You can't reasonably start to set expectations of leadership from within if you don't know what people are good at. Leaders and even team members on player-led teams really know each other very well. They know each other's work products. They know each other's strengths when it comes to different situations. He or she's really great at talking on a stage. He or she really great when it's a one-on-one conversation, right? Like I know those things, but then I also know other things that inspire you, personal things. I know about your family life. I know about certain places or certain ideas that really make you curious. I know how you might react if somebody were to surprise you. They really get to know each other on a deep personal level. And leaders of player-led teams are also really skilled at setting clear expectations around everything. But I think first and foremost, expectations around why we're here. What's our vision? What's our purpose for being here? And I could talk more about any of these things. But the last thing I think that leaders of player-led teams, they do differently than other leaders is that they are willing to relinquish control. I think maybe it's a self-stated, of course, if you're leading a player-led team, that it takes a really special person to be able to do that and to be able to do it meaningfully. I think oftentimes we'll say, yeah, okay, you could go ahead and own this, and we're leading in the background and we're sending a follow-up note, or we're writing down the way we would have done it. And it takes a special kind of leader to say, you're going to do things differently than I might have done them, but you're still working towards the same goal. We're still on the same team, and I'm going to go ahead and let you fly with that.
For a leader who may be listening right now that does not have a player-led team, is there something that he or she can do to kind of start heading in that direction?
Yeah. So I think we've studied this a lot, and we have a whole bunch of different routines that we think can really make a difference in forging a team of leaders and creating this idea of a player-led team. I think one that really calls to me and stands out to me is being able to articulate what our vision is and what our strategy is for accomplishing that vision. Being able to articulate it in a way that makes it simple and clear, and then also aligning the team to it often. I think a lot of the leaders that we work with often presume, okay, it's the beginning of the year. I'm going to tell the team what we're going to focus on for the year. And then, maybe I'll check in mid-year. And that's not enough. Are you doing things that you knew that you would be doing when you set out in January? No, probably not. A lot of things change, and that's fine. I think, change and shifting direction is part of I think everybody's life now at the speed of, our world right now. But being able to center home and say, okay, but this is where the overall direction is super critical. The alignment erodes over time. And I think leaders often forget that. So even if it's in a simple way of saying, as a reminder, this is what we set out to do, or calling out what has changed and how it's changed, important things for leaders to do.
Do you think every team can become a player-led team? Or is there some teams that maybe this doesn't work for, or there's just no way for them to become that?
Yeah, that's a good question. The optimist in me says that every team can improve. I think every team can become more player-led. I think of some structural pieces to how many organizations are set up and run that would make it very hard, if not impossible, for player-led teams to really take off. And again, that goes back to the hierarchy is, if I'm a leader within an organization, I'm trying to encourage my team to be one that is player-led, but I have a team of leaders above me who are micromanaging me and micromanaging, therefore, all of the other decisions I get to do. It just makes it more challenging, but I don't think that's a reason to not try. Yeah.
What are some fun transformations you have seen in your work with your clients from, let's say, traditional to killing it, all-star player-led team?
So specifically working on improving the team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've done a lot of cool things. I don't think I've ever, unfortunately, gotten the opportunity of like, make us a player-led team. That would have been really cool. But we've worked with a few organizations on better understanding. So I talked about expectations. I talked about setting clear expectations and how important that is in a player-led team so that people know when they're going to be expected to lead and like what the rules of engagement are around leading on this team. And I think a lot of that comes down to values. Not always, but I think in best case scenarios, teams like this have values that drive their actions and behaviors and decisions. So like if I have a set of team values and I go into a situation with a client, my leader, my de facto leader isn't there. The client presents me with a really challenging situation where a vendor was late and they had to, like something that is messed up. I need to be able to respond on behalf of the team. So I need to know what values we have. We value client experience more than anything else. We're going to make that situation right. Even if it means bottom dollar, we're losing out on something with a supplier, we're going to make sure the client has what they need. So we worked with we worked with teams before in setting values, but really are articulating values in small ways every day. And I think that's the key of when it comes to values. I think you both have probably been a part of lots of conversations where values are important and let's talk about the right values. And we could probably talk till we're blue in the face. I think my point of view is you have to know what matters. So you need to have values, but perhaps even more importantly, you need to use them. So if you say you value teamwork, don't incentivize people to bring in solo projects or silent solo work, right? Like incentivize our teams to go out and win new clients together, and that will encourage teamwork. If you say you value innovation, make sure leaders are giving their teams time on their calendar to have an opportunity to do some of the deep thinking that innovation requires. We've worked with teams before who would actually have innovation week, where aside from, core business things that need to happen, the rest of the time is clear. Put all your other projects aside. We need to have dedicated time for innovation because it's important to us. So the more often and the more ways you can express values, the better. I think if there's a way you can work in a daily expression of the values you have, awesome. We have a client who is a faith-based client, and one of their values is, health of mind, body, and spirit. And one of the ways that they express this value every day is that every meeting starts with a personal reflection. It doesn't have to be religious. It could be a poem. It could be an image that really inspired someone. And every meeting, it doesn't matter what the meeting is about. It doesn't matter how short the meeting is. Someone volunteers or they plan ahead for somebody to share a brief reflection. And it's a 2-minute thing, but it's just a nice way to remind everybody that this is what's important to us. Okay, now let's get to work.
I like that a lot. Switching gears here, admired leadership. This seems like a pretty big initiative. Can you tell us where it came from, what it's about, and how it's going?
Yeah, sure. So admired leadership, the company is really based on the concept of what makes the best leaders the best at what they do. So about 30 plus years ago now, we were asked to do some organizational research in understanding leadership in a company, right? Like who are the best leaders? Who are the leaders that need a little help? And what can we do to make more of the former and less of the latter? And in conducting that research, we found that there are usually two strains of leaders. One being a leader that's able to get really great results. always driving the team pretty hard, always, coming up positive on the balance sheet. But what we found with this track one leader is that, people typically didn't really like them. We're always trying to maybe find a way to get out from under them if they could. The second track of leader that we found is one who might not have consistent results. I mean, results enough to be within the business, but not outstanding results. But on the other hand, they had great followership. They had people who were, trying to request relocation so that they could work with this leader. And then what we had, what was very, very rare, was the third track, in which we ended up, with the name admired leader, are the leaders who are able to do both, who are able to generate great results, regardless of what the situational context is, regardless of the team that they had, regardless of what the current economic or industry headwinds were. They got great results, and people loved to work for them and would go to the ends of the earth for them. And so, the basis of our business now, which involves a lot of leadership development, coaching, team coaching, engagements where we're working with teams to think about things like values and how to set clear expectations around strategy, culture, all that jazz, is really one based in the behaviors of these leaders. So oftentimes when we're talking about leader development theories, there's a lot of psychological aspects to it. Like, okay, well, you're an ABCD leader, so that means you're going to have to always have your windows closed when you're talking with someone and be focused on this and that, which I think psychological assessments and knowing who we are and what our tendencies are useful, but they're not sufficient in becoming a better leader. So as we studied these admired leaders, what we realized is that they have things that they do every day that are different from the other leaders. And how can we teach and help other leaders practice these behaviors, make them their own, so that we're really elevating leadership wherever we go. And that's the gist of admired leadership. We're finding out how we can do it in all ways. We're always looking for new behaviors and thinking about unique ways that we can share them with our clients.
Interesting. So there's a lot going on in the world today. Layoffs, we've got prices rising on everything. We're in wars. AI is taking over the planet. It just seems like we're in a movie. What is one thing that leaders could be focused on today to kind of help them weather the storm and to ensure that they come out stronger?
Yeah, this is a tough one. We often work with teams of leaders and individual leaders on managing uncertainty or leading during times of uncertainty. And unfortunately, it feels like we've been having that specific conversation with a lot of our clients for the past couple of years. The content, though, isn't the same, given there's lots, like you had said, there's lots of different threats out there, but leaders are always on stage with the teams they lead, and even further down, depending on how far up they are as a leader. They're always on stage. People are looking at them to understand, how does what's going on impact me? What does it mean for our company? Are we going to make it? Am I going to have a job next month? All of these questions that may be swirling in some of our team members' heads. And so there's lots of things that we coach around this, but I think one of the strongest takeaways for a leader in this situation is, balanced optimism. You can be realistic about the challenges that we have in front of us, whether they're in our organization or outside of our organization or both. But we need to be optimistic. We need to end the conversation optimistically in some way. So, you can be optimistic about the team. You can say, we've got a stream of investors who are going to pull out. But even if that happens, I know that our team is going to be there to pick up the pieces. There are things that you need to really hit home on and be optimistic about as a leader, because they're looking to you for that kind of picture.
I want to share a story with you and see whether this defines kind of the benefit of player-led teams. But I was listening to a podcast with the founder and CEO of Cotopaxi. I guess he's not a CEO anymore because he stepped down to serve a mission. And the interesting thing was that in 2020, before the pandemic, I think it was like their worst year ever. They were on track for their worst year ever. And then the pandemic happened and, retail went completely offline. People were not traveling. They sell, travel gear and backpacks and whatnot. And the founder asked everyone on the team, which was pretty small in 2020, they've grown a lot, about, hey, what can we do? Like, what can we do to turn this company around? And someone, I don't think it was him, had the idea of we should sell masks, like surgical masks. And if you've seen the colorful masks, they say do good. That's a Cotopaxi mask. And it ended up, they had their most profitable year, or they turned a profit for the first time in 2020 at the end of the year, in completely crazy situation, right? When retail was non-existent, people were not traveling. And I was listening to that story, and this is kind of how I imagine amazing teams, like when you're talking about Miracle on Ice and all that. It's like when everyone's like, what are we going to do? It's not just fear because the founder needs to figure it out, right? Everyone's like, oh crap, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
I wonder if that resonates. Like, do you see that when people like all hands on deck, we're in?
Well, I love that example because I think it also hits something that we know is really important, is that you need to remove fear in a lot of ways. So it sounds like that leader was willing and vulnerable enough to say like, hey, I'm not afraid to tell you how bad the situation is. Now, I'm not over here screaming into a corner or a pillow. I'm calm, I'm collected. I'm optimistic about what we can do together. But in that space, in that room, quote unquote, I'm sure it was virtual if it was 2020, creating safety so that people could say, I have an idea. And then how that leader responds to that, it just perpetuates that space where we can say, let's bring all hands on deck for this. And I know, you played sports, but like any team is the same as a sports team where you're going to have good days. Each individual person's going to have good days and going to have bad days. When we know those bad days are coming, we can step in and help one another. But we also need to be able to admit when our bad days are. So it takes that environment of safety and vulnerability and knowing each other well enough to say like, hey, I see what's happening here. Let me take over. Let me share this idea. Let me step in, because tomorrow's a new day. Tomorrow you're going to be a different Una, and we can pick up again from there. Just the continuity of, in my mind, it's always excellence for the team takes precedence over you or me or what kind of day we're having.
And he kind of talks about the behaviors, right? How does not necessarily is this founder / CEO a high D on the disc, or their strength is relator, or whatever all the strengths are in StrengthsFinder. What he did was someone had an idea and he said, yes, and just like in improv, he didn't say no, right? Maybe there was so much more to articulate, but the behavior sounds like was more, let's do it, or let's think about it. It wasn't shutting someone down just because they had an idea that might not be feasible at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I think the leaders play a really important role in doing that. How they react when people take risks is really important. And then making sure they're taking the first pass at being vulnerable or being self-critical. I think that's another behavior that might be worthwhile exploring. Sometimes we work with individual leaders who are very focused on the exterior facade, the shell of, I am a very direct giving leader. I give directions, and it's okay to let the team know that you might be challenged by this particular question you've been asking yourself. Share that question. Share how you've been thinking about it. Share the things that have, and just getting to that spot with leaders is a good step in getting to player led.
I feel like a lot of what we're talking about is like the recipe for eating healthy and losing weight, eat less, walk more. And yet it's so hard. right? There's a reason why we can't do it all the time, but we don't do it. What's so hard about this? Or what's the hardest thing about building a player-led team? And I guess being an admirer leader, I feel like they come hand in hand, that stop people from just doing this today.
Yeah. I think it's hard to change habits that we might have that are in conflict with some of the behaviors we're talking about. If I'm a leader and I've always done it this way, where I run every meeting and I own the agenda and I never let anyone else talk, like that transition to letting somebody else own the agenda completely is going to be a harder one. To be successful, what we often tell the leaders we work with is like, let's start small. Let's choose and focus on a few behaviors that you think you can really master authentically to who you are. And, it's not just doing these things for effect. It's doing them as a routine, as a habit. So if you're more comfortable, start doing it at home. Most people, I don't think, have meetings with their spouse or their children, but think about how you're letting other people take up space at home. Practice. Ask your family for feedback if you're more comfortable, and then start doing it with your team. Again, the teams you lead will smell the inauthenticity right away. They're like, this leader's just doing this because he took a course or something, like that. That's often sometimes the feedback we hear with these things, but it's about finding ways to make the behaviors a habit to who you are. One of the biggest and I think the first obstacles in overcoming that is just deciding who you want to be. Like, is this the kind of leader I want to be? And really committing to that is often a very powerful first step. I'm reminded of John McCain when he was a prisoner of war, was asked, how were you so brave? And he said, I wasn't brave. Sometimes to be brave, you just need to act brave. So some of this is action begetting the belief, which begets the action. And then that's what creates the habit. But that's another thing that we often work with leaders who are scared or hesitant or not sure they can do it. Is sometimes you just got to act a part.
I read this quote once, forgot where it is from, but it said, you act yourself into feeling versus feel yourself into acting.
Yeah.
Back to the gym metaphor. If you wait to feel to go to the gym, the feeling rarely comes, right? To do something unpleasant with your body. Yeah. Sounds like a lot of these new habits are the same.
Yeah, but back to the, you had said that, the recipe for being healthy: eat less, walk more. You can hone in on those, like, oh, I need to do more of this. I need to do X, Y, or Z. Or you could wake up every day and tell yourself, like, I'm the kind of person that takes the steps. That's just the kind of person I am. And then when you tell yourself that and you find yourself between the elevator and the steps, it's like a no-brainer. You start to not even think about the weight of the decision, the overcoming the willpower, like all the science behind that is, you just tell yourself you're that kind of person, and it gets you one step closer.
Interesting. I'm curious about any challenges you come across with leaders changing the behaviors, stuff like that. I'm just kind of curious, what are common challenges that you face when you're trying to coach a leader and work with them in your admired leadership program?
Yeah. Without going into like NDA territory, I think oftentimes leaders we work with, especially if they've worked with other coaches, they're really focused on identifying the issue. And I think that's important. And especially if they have a very specific goal, like this year I need to promote 3 people within my team, or I'm not hitting the exact standards that are expected of me. Like that's a very specific goal. But when it comes to just general improvement and leadership effectiveness, thinking about, well, why am I the way I am? Carving themselves into this, well, see, I can't do it that way because I'm somebody who I just don't get other people. And this assessment tells me that I'm just not going to be cut out for it. And having to call them out on that and say, it's not an excuse to become a better leader. Is this something that you really want to do? I think that's one of the challenges that we come across pretty frequently.
Got it.
Let's say someone's listening to this and saying, maybe they're not in a managerial position, and they say, this player-led team sure sounds awesome, and I feel like I am exhibiting some of the behaviors where I'm taking initiative and whatnot. What tips would you give to someone who says, I want to make my team that way, right? Because the leader doesn't necessarily have to be the manager as well. Anyone on the team can exhibit leadership. So like if you're on a team as a contributor, what can you do today to help your team become player-led from no position of authority?
Oh, I love that. I love that idea, because I think there's certainly opportunity and the possibility of saying, like, all right, I'm not the de facto leader, but I want everybody to start to live up to the same set of expectations. And how can we know what those are? So, I mean, one easy one is just stepping up when the leader's not in the room. Sometimes there will be more clear opportunities for that than others. But like you said, taking initiative and making calls that might seem to bounce against the hierarchy, but always reverting back to, like, I mean, I'm just imagining someone in a team setting and somebody who is not willing to take initiative saying, like, I don't think we're ready for this. I don't think we can do it. Having in your back pocket, like, hey, I think that this is what our team needs. It's not about me, right? Like, I think oftentimes it comes down to that ego again, where I'm not doing this because I want my boss's job. I'm doing this because I think I'm taking this initiative because I think it's going to make our team the most successful. And I think this will be unsurprising to both of you. I think giving peer feedback and especially peer recognition of when I see things done the way that is in the player-led mindset, when I see somebody else stepping up and doing or saying something that is, pushing ego down, putting leadership forward, I call it out. I say, hey, that was really cool. And that's exactly what we need to do. I have another opportunity over here. Could you come help me do it? It's like taking that seed and germinating it and spreading it as far as you can.
Okay, this is totally unrelated, but you get to do this every day. You get to work with leaders and teams, and you get to see things that people do well and don't do so well. So when you work with your team, whether it's your CRA Admired Leadership team or your family team, what are some things that the behaviors you like to exhibit to build a player-led team around you?
Oh, it's a good one. Something I could always get better at and always work on. So I'm not like the exemplar for this by any means, but I think I do a pretty good job of especially when giving feedback, which could sometimes be seen as, Diana she just wants to pick everything apart. She's just being so critical of everything I do. Reframing those situations and those opportunities for feedback as learning opportunities. So it's not necessarily about them being wrong, but instead of going into a situation like that, one thing that I try to do is first say, hey, I really care about the quality of our work, even if it's something as simple as setting up an internal meeting, because if we have typos in our internal meetings, how am I going to believe that the work that we're working on with our clients isn't going to have errors in it? So, like, first things first, let's try to be as precise as possible. And it's not about you, and it's not about your inability or, what you might struggle with as a person. It's about us aligning to what that value is, or what that core objective is, something that drives how I interact with people, how I give feedback. I am a direct person, and I'm self-aware to know that. And so sometimes the steps I take personally are just like softening that a little bit to make sure people, it's not personal. It's just like, I care about the team. I care about quality. So let's almost put that up front and make sure you know where I'm coming from.
I love that. With Hey Taco, Everyone has 5 tacos to give each day to recognize someone for something they've done, or to show appreciation, or to just simply put a smile on someone's face. Who are you giving your 5 tacos to today?
Oh, goodness. I'm going to take the personal route. So I have 3 young children, and my husband and I are going to Phoenix for a friend's wedding this week. And my in-laws are coming to town to watch the kids. So I give all my tacos to them because I am so appreciative of their willingness to help out. Albeit a little bit nervous about how the whole trip's going to go, I'm more appreciative. And so tacos to them.
I love that. Well, Diana, it was great chatting with you today. I appreciate you for joining us on the Amazing Teams podcast. Where can people go to learn more and find you on the internet?
Sure. We're not very social friendly, but we do have a website. Admiredleadership.com is where you can learn more about our great Admired Leadership content. And you can learn more about our consulting arm of the business at crainc.com. That's crainc.com.
Got it. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diana.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, then please share this podcast with others. And we would love to know how we did. You can tell us by going to amazingteams.com/feedback.